Right. Welcome to Finding Good Franchises, the show for courageous people who know they are meant for more and are willing to do something about it. This is the place for you to find good franchises. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what? You're buying a franchise? And talking through with a panel, handling those difficult conversations with your tribe about your interest in buying a franchise. And so I know this is a challenging topic. It's one that brings up a lot of emotions, but I think it's important. It's something that is a critical factor to whether or not the franchise owner will be successful or not. So we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to dive into this. So first, I want to just kind of mention that buying a business or a franchise, it's really different than most types of investments. Most types of investments, you just put your money in. But this, you're mixing components of just a really significant financial investment, but you're also mixing the component of what you're doing day to day. So the work that you're going to accomplish in a day. And so you have to kind of take into consideration, is it going to fit with your skill sets and who you are and what you want to do and who you want to be? And then on top of those complexities, we add in the family on top of it. So what are their needs and their wants? And so all of these things added together can just create a bit of complexity. And so we've been doing this a long time. And so we've seen lots of different family dynamics out there. And each person really comes with a unique set of a family story, right? And so sometimes we'll see a couple that is going to buy the franchise together. And so the husband and wife, they will be in total alignment and they'll be on all the calls together. They'll go through all the details and hash them out together. And ultimately, they'll make the decision on that franchise together. Then we have the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So these are people who are business professionals. They've been in either corporate America or have owned businesses before, sometimes multiples, and they're just very confident and strong. And so if we insisted that the spouse be on the calls with them, then they'd almost feel insulted from that. And then there are the people in the middle who have a dream, and they're wanting to do something. They're wanting to fulfill some part of themselves, but they don't necessarily have the support of their circle of influence yet. And so their heart is kind of seeking something that they don't know how to get their tribe aligned with and rallying around them for. And it's a primal instinct. It's something that we're designed for as a species. We're social animals. And so approval and acceptance of our support group, that's really hard coded in our DNA. It's a necessity for survival. And it's, always been that way. And so that fear of having the lack of approval can be very detracting from who we know we're really meant to be. And so on today's show, we're going to talk about having that conversation with your spouse or your tribe in a productive way that gets both sides feeling like they're being heard, and then also really supporting each other's vision of what the future looks like for them together. And so on today's panel, we have Eric Riess, who is a partner at Lathrop GPM. That's a law firm with over 500 attorneys at it. They're nationwide and they represent hundreds of franchises. He's also 2020 and 2021's Best Lawyers in America award recipient. So he knows what he's talking about. He's a CPA and business advisor, as well as an independent business owner. And then we have Amanda Ramirez, who is our national franchise trainer. She's an award-winning franchise broker, and she's worked with immigration clients and international clients, helping them do everything from get their visa, set up and launch a franchise, run and operate those franchises all over the country. And so she really has a lot of experience in franchising at all capacities. And then I'm Sabrina Wall. I am a national franchise trainer. I'm also an owner or operator of about 27 different franchise locations that we've owned or operated for myself or for other investors. And that was within 4 different franchise systems. I was also recently awarded the 2020 CEOs of the Year Award recipient from the Business Journal. And I'm the CEO of the Franchise Brokers Association. So welcome, Eric and Amanda, to the show.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started with you, Amanda. Why don't we talk a little bit about your experience, because you are working with buyers on a regular basis and they're going through this process of purchasing a franchise. Have you ever had a situation where the buyer chose not to buy a franchise because they couldn't get their friends or family to really rally around them and support them?
Many times. Yeah, so the approval of the circle of influence is critical in the decision making, right? So we can try to do everything possible to get them to be on the calls, to understand the process. But if they're not willing to do that, it becomes a problem. So I've had situations where the husband was very interested and he selected a franchise, and then when he went to explain it and to bring it to the wife's attention, she was just not okay with it. But at the same time, I also was not able to get the wife on any of the calls, right? So after a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out what are the most effective ways to get the spouse involved, we have to think of it as it's no one's fault. If the person looking for the franchise is having a hard time in bringing the spouse into the picture, there's something going on. So it could be that the wife or the spouse is really busy working. It could be that they are not okay with that decision because they're scared. There's some level of fear going on. And the wife or the husband may not even know how to address that. So yes, it has happened a lot of different times, but I'm happy to share some of the ways that we have been able to overcome it. So do you want me to go ahead and talk about that or?
Sure. What's one of them? Let's pick one.
Okay, let's pick one. So one main one that I usually do is during the initial consultation, I try to find out, is there going to be a spouse involved? What's their level of involvement in the business? It doesn't matter if they're not going to run the business or not. So Eric is probably going to talk about this, but most franchisors are going to make the wife or the husband sign a guarantee. when it's time to sign the franchise agreement, okay, now we're at the end of the process and they're looking at the agreement and saying, oh, I have to sign this and I have no idea what my husband is buying, right? So initially, you really have to find out what's the level of involvement. If they're not going to be involved, they still have to know what's going on. Right. So instead of me forcing the spouse to be on the call, I give them homework and I say to the husband or the wife, okay, these are the things that you've learned so far. So how would you explain it to your spouse? And I have them talk to me like I'm the spouse, right? And this is where the magic happens, because a lot of times I don't even know what to say. They're not going to be okay with this. So, we work those things out and find the most effective way to explain it to the spouse and find what their concerns are, just so it's easier for them to accept it and even be willing to be part of the process.
Okay. Eric, I'm sure you've seen the other side where, somebody has gone ahead and purchased without the consent or buy-in of the family, and you've probably seen things turn out badly. What would you have to say to people that are going through that kind of situation or could potentially go through that kind of situation?
Yeah, well, there's a legal side of this, as Amanda suggested correctly, and then there's a practical side of it, and then there's the personal side of it, okay? So from a legal perspective, Amanda's absolutely correct. Most franchise investments require that spouses or now significant others sign the guarantee. And the personal guarantee of a franchise agreement is there because the franchisor wants to make sure, and I hate to use this cliche, but I think it sums it up, that the franchisee has skin in the game, because otherwise a franchisee could set up an entity, an LLC, not really have any assets in it. And then if the franchisee gets bored with the franchise, they could say, I'm going to walk away from it. And the franchisor really doesn't have any security for the obligations that I've agreed to. And that's the reason for the personal guarantee. The reason for the spousal guarantee is because if you only have one spouse sign the guarantee, then if that franchisee wants to get out of their obligations, they then retitle all of their assets over into the name of the spouse. And without that spousal guarantee, the franchisor again lacks security. So that's part of the legal reason why the spouse or significant other needs to be involved. The other legal reason is it's both of your money, okay? Whether it's a 401k or IRA or you're just taking it out of savings or whatever, this is marital assets generally that are being used to invest in a business. And so, of course, the spouse should be involved because it's his or her money too. Now, from a practical perspective, you guys are taking a risk together. Spouses are taking a risk together. And many times a franchisee is not a spring chicken. Many times a franchisee is someone who spent significant time being an employee. They're used to that life. That's the way their marriage has gone. And now all of a sudden, this is a pretty big step, becoming a business owner and taking money and not investing it in the stock market like we're used to, or in a certificate of deposit or whatever we like to put our retirement funds in, and you're investing it in a business and you're taking a significant risk. And so therefore, of course, the spouse needs to be involved because it's his or her risk too. I'll tell you just one personal story. So for many years, I went to work, all right? I went to work at a law firm, and I don't even know that my spouse knew what the hell I did, to be quite honest with you, but she knew I brought home a paycheck, and that was good. And so long as I, put in my 50 hours and brought home the paycheck, everything was cool, all right? And then finally, we decided to go into business together. And we decided to go into business together when I was relatively old. I was 50 years old when we decided to do this. And this business required us to borrow literally millions of dollars. So at a time when my own father, at 50 years old, owed no one anything, okay, literally no debt at all at 50, he retired at 52, I said, I've got a brilliant idea. Let's go into debt in the millions of dollars. What do you think about that? All right. And fortunately, it's worked out quite well for us, but that, of course, has to be a joint decision because you're really changing what your life is like, not just from a risk perspective, but what your everyday existence is going to be and whether your spouse is going to materially participate in the business itself or not. And we'll talk about allocation of roles here in a little bit. We really do need to include them because they're part of it. They're part of it from a risk perspective, an asset perspective, and just how your life is going to change as a business owner. I would argue to anyone it's going to change for the better, but it's going to change.
Right.
It's much different than going to work, coming home, getting a paycheck.
Right.
So again, I probably over answered that question, but this is a very personal topic for me because I'm in business with my spouse, at least in one of the businesses that I'm into.
Yeah. Well, I am too. I'm in business with my spouse as well. And from my perspective, it's actually really deepened our relationship. It's one of the things that I love about our relationship is that we get to like problem solve. It's almost like building a house together or something. You do these projects together and you get creative together and you're able to understand more clearly what's going on. So you have like let's say you have a work situation or a work scenario, and both of you know the players in the scenario, and both of you know what some of the outcomes could be. So when you're talking, you're having more powerful conversations, in my opinion and my experience. And so I have really enjoyed that experience, and it's not always been easy. I mean, it's running a business is, you have ups and downs, and there are days that are really a struggle, especially in that first couple of years. And yet it builds this deeper connection and deeper relationship. So I am a huge proponent of it because for my life, it's just been such a blessing that I've have him and have his support to help me see things I don't see and be more successful and be more authentically who I am. And I don't think I would be anywhere near as far developed if I didn't have that. And so running a business, one of the big things that it does is it grows you. Like it teaches you things about yourself that you never knew, and it helps you to become a more developed person. And having him there as I'm going through that growth has just been really beautiful. So I hope that in this talk, we can share some of those insights and tips that help us to have that kind of connection and relationship through the business ownership experience. And I think it all starts with communication. And I'd love to hear what your tips are for handling communication with the spouse early on. So what do you do to talk to them and help them to see your way, to see your vision?
Yeah, Sabrina, and as you know, I know your husband and I know you guys work well together, but I'm sure I know everybody's relationship is different. I'm sure that also it's stressful at times, right? And so there's an operational perspective once the business is going, and then there's a business preparedness, getting ready to invest, et cetera. And from an operational perspective, at least for us, and I know that every relationship is different, it's important to know what your lane is. So,
really important.
If your spouse is going to materially participate in the business, then he or she needs to have a lane, right? They need to be in charge of that, all right? And then the spouse is in charge of the other. And that doesn't mean that you don't talk about each other's lane, but I think it's important to stay in your lane, because otherwise what happens is you're second guessing each other, and you wouldn't do that to a coworker. And sometimes it feels like it's easier almost to step into the lane of your spouse, right? You're used to yelling at Chris for not matching his clothes correctly, or having one too many beers when you go out to eat, or whatever we do to our spouses, right? So sometimes we feel that we have a license as a spouse to, I don't want to say criticize, but to add our 2 cents, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's better not to do that. It's better to know what each other's roles are. And I think it's important, even if your spouse is not going to have a material role in the business, and he or she may have their own thing going, they're employed, or they may have their own business, I do think it's important that they understand the business, so they understand what are the challenges, what you're going through, not from a negative perspective, but I think it's more important than when you are, I will say, just an employee. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but when you're a business owner, I think it's important that your spouse understand the challenges and the stresses that you're dealing with, because I think it's good for the marriage, quite frankly. But on the beginning end of it, when someone is contemplating taking this risk, right? And when I say taking a risk, understand, I mean that I am a firm believer in there is no reward without risk, all right? And I know that myself because I'm proof of that. It wasn't until I took risks that I started making pretty decent money. And I know it's not all about the money, but let's all be honest, it's got a lot to do with it, okay? Because, the money is how we're rewarded for hard work, among other things. But that money is always nice, particularly if you have 4 kids like I do, all right? But I think it's important in the preparedness of making the investment that the spouse truly understand what you're getting into. That doesn't necessarily mean that the spouse is going to be as excited as you are to buy a doggy daycare or to buy, a men's haircutting salon or whatever you're getting into, okay? Your passion is not going to be your spouse's passion. That would be a very boring world if you agreed on everything. But I think that your spouse ought to participate in the due diligence, in the discovery day, where you go to the franchisor and visit with the franchisor. It's important that your spouse understand who you're affiliating with, because your spouse, who I'm assuming you love and who I'm assuming you trust, is going to be able to provide invaluable input and some challenges for you. They're going to say, well, what about this? And what about that? And that's all good. That's part of how you vet the business that you ultimately select. So I'm all about business ownership, Sabrina, as you know, but the spouse is an absolute important and necessary piece of the puzzle, for sure.
Two things that you just said there. One, when you were talking earlier about the spouse being in their lanes,
yeah,
I think a lot of that can also be overcome just by the way that you talk to them. So if you approach a conversation giving them the benefit of the doubt, like that's been one of the main core values that we've had, is that we always give each other the benefit of the doubt. And the relationship is always more important than the issue. That's one of the mantras that we often say. And
Good.
so giving each other the benefit of the doubt from the beginning, and then approaching it, you ask permission first. So I have some feedback. Would you want to hear what I have to say? Or if you don't, if you want to do it on your own, I totally understand that too. So you ask permission to give the feedback. And when you do that, people say yes or no, and they take the feedback differently. It's a lot different experience than saying, you're not doing that right. If you say, hey, I'm kind of noticing something and I have some feedback, but do you want to hear it or not? And I totally understand either way. So you just kind of like put it out there and then give them time to respond with the proper answer. And then the second thing that you said was you were talking about how they might have good feedback for you, and that when they go to the discovery day, they might be able to share insights that you didn't see. And I was just listening to a podcast with Tony Robbins, and he was talking about how he would much prefer, or most people operate where they have 12 decisions to make. And so they give one decision to each person. But what he would rather do is have 12 people make one decision, because you can, the way they see it and the way they understand it, different angles, it helps to have a more full picture of how people are going to perceive how you move forward with it. So I thought that was a really powerful comment. And it's true when you're working with your spouse or you're deciding whether or not the franchise is right for you, and going through that due diligence, having that perspective does provide more clarity. It does give you the feeling that, oh, I know more now because I have extra eyes on it and I have a different perspective. And so I can be more intelligent and more thoughtful about the purchase that I make. Amanda,
just one other point. I bet you and Chris are better at it than me and Jill, but me and Jill tend to bicker a lot, okay? And we bicker about the dumbest things, okay? Sometimes when family's over and they hear us, what we bicker about, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys waste your time bickering about the dumbest things. And we do, right? But when you're in a business role, all right, in addition to this lane business, you need to understand that you're speaking to your spouse and communicating with your spouse as a fellow business person, right? And if you are not communicating in a way that would be acceptable to speaking to another business associate who you happen to not be sharing your life with, let me just say this. Don't let the comfort of your marriage creep into those business communications. And it's a tricky thing to do sometimes, at least it is for us, for sure. So it's something to keep in mind.
Well, a way to do that we've found be really effective is have family meetings. So almost like you just exactly like you would in a business, you have family meetings where you're talking about what you want to do as a family, what each other's schedules are, what your priorities are for the week. That's been one of the most like life-changing ideas and life-changing experiences for family relationships, because so many different things are happening and it's so easy to get siloed into whatever you're doing. But having the family meeting is a way for everybody to come and connect and talk about what you've been going through and talk about what you want to do. And so you kind of treat this experience of buying a franchise in exactly the same way. You want to have a family meeting or a series of family meetings that allow you to discuss what you're proposing and what your interest is, and actually work through it together. So if you're nervous about getting the buy-in from your spouse or your circle of influence, having a meeting about it and actually setting the stage up front and saying, we're going to have a series of meetings because I want to go on an adventure and it's something that I have a real desire for, but I want to make sure that I'm very thoughtful and that I have your input in it and that we kind of create this vision together of what our life is going to be like. So over the course of the next 3 weeks, let's have a regular weekly meeting where we talk about, our future. And anytime you have a conversation like that, where you're taking the time out to just be thoughtful about each other and where you want to align and create the future together, it creates so much bonding. It's really special. And it'll actually make all the other parts of your relationship even better if you approach it that way. So that is probably one of the most important things that I would suggest, is to not just have one discussion, but kind of set the stage to have a series of discussions talking about your future together and really building a life together. And when you do that, you're starting from a place of them being open to hearing your message and open to hearing what your wishes, hopes, and dreams are. And that makes a big difference to their openness to accepting what your vision is. And I know, Amanda, you are like this too. So why don't you tell us your thoughts?
So just these are just few tips that I've experienced in the past. So I think a lot of spouses are just intimidated by the process. It's, you don't know what you don't know. You're not going to be involved in the business. So why are you going to be sitting on the calls? You're afraid they're going to ask you questions. You're afraid you're not going to know how to answer them, right? So it's a combination of working with a good broker, first of all, because if they know what they're doing, they're going to identify that right away and they're going to help you, right? So I would never pressure a spouse to be on every call, but what I have done in the past was, if we're really that scared, or if we're not comfortable sitting on the calls, let me record the initial calls, especially, or some of the calls with the franchisors, and then you take it to your family meeting. And I've had lots of couples do it where, okay, they take it to the meeting, or they set some time apart and they watch it together and they discuss it, because now you're sharing whatever it is that you're learning with your spouse, and they're learning and they don't have the pressure of being in front of the franchisor.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing that I see is what's the holdback, what's the hesitation on why your spouse doesn't want to be part of the call. And it's usually that, well, she's not going to be on the business, or he's not going to run it. And then I find out that it's because they're afraid that they're going to have the expectation of answering a lot of questions and knowing like having the skill sets that maybe the other spouse has, but they lack, right? And it has nothing to do with that. I mean, going back to everybody's point on the emotional side, this is an emotional decision. This is a family decision. It's your money on the line. And even if you're not going to run the business, there are plenty of strategies out there that we can implement and help you, just so you can successfully work with the spouse and everybody is on the same page.
I think what you said was really awesome. And the idea of, the spouse being nervous on the call, if you just set proper expectations from the very beginning with the franchisor, and let the franchisor, know my spouse, she just wants to listen in, she or he just wants to listen in, whatever it is. and kind of be a fly on the wall to learn about it, but it's really going to be more direct with me. If you set that expectation up early, the franchisor is not going to put them in an uncomfortable position, and they can just be the fly on the wall. So it really does overcome that gap just by communicating, just by being clear about what the expectation is, then how you want to be treated as a buyer going through this process with the franchisor. All right, so we've got number one, which is have the family meeting. And that's really important. You don't want to sell them on anything. I know, Amanda, this is something that you're really passionate about. Don't start the meeting and then try to oversell the candidate. You're not trying to pitch, or the spouse. You're not trying to like pitch them on it. You're not trying to be the one that has all the answers. You're trying to set the stage for the discussion. You're trying to hear them. You're trying to hear what their needs are and build the future together. So it's not about hard selling them on your choice. Do you have anything else you want to say about that, Amanda?
Well, so I don't own a business with my spouse, but it's something that we constantly talk about, and it's the perfect example because we are completely different. So and we use a business assessment in our association that helps match the right type of franchise with that person's business skills and even personality in a way. So, we're pretty much opposite. I'm the achiever. I'm the, go, go, go. I can sell you stuff, but I'm usually very optimistic. And then I think about like what can go wrong, right? And while he's the opposite, he's thinking about security. He's been in corporate America for over 20 years. He's thinking about, how is that? How are we going to be able to maintain the paycheck? How are we going to be able to continue paying our bills? What if the business doesn't work? While I'm thinking, it's gonna work, like that's not even something that comes to mind. So understanding, and this is the thing, a lot of couples, they know each other on emotional level, personal level, but when it comes to business, when it comes to working together, you may not understand how they're going to react. So I would say, be gentle and be understanding and really listen, because everybody is going to have an immediate type of, feeling, right? And then from there, once you identify their concerns, then you have to try to address that and solve that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if it's, this has happened before, the whole security of income, right? So how are we going to be able to maintain the income that we're making right now so we can pay our bills? It's a basic question that I think everybody's going to want to know. But for the risky person, they don't care. They're just saying, look, we're going to make lots of money, but we may have to eat ramen noodles for year one. It is what it is, but the other person may have a different mentality. So in that scenario, believe it or not, there are ways and strategies that you can actually make sure that you are having that income coming in for that year that you're ramping up that business, right? I'm not going to share how that works. Only if you talk to me. But there's a way and that's what people don't understand. Just because you're starting a business doesn't mean you're going to be not making money for 6 months to a year. You can find a way to still make that income and grow the business at the same time. And if that's what it takes to get your spouse to buy in, then let's figure it out and prepare you to have that conversation. So we're not just going out there and saying, hey babe, let's do this and we're going to make tons of money and I know you want to do it. Because if you can't identify their concerns first, then that's probably where you're having a hard time with.
Yeah. So you kind of jumped ahead to our fourth point. So I'm going to go back for a minute to the number one point, which is having the family meeting. And I would just say that when you're having the family meeting, definitely have it in multiple iterations, because you want the information to soak in. You want to give them time to think of it and work through their issues and work through their questions about it, and then have this open format where you can talk about it again and keep hashing out those details now that you've known more and more about the franchise. So the second kind of thing to help establish the right relationship or the right conversation is to really understand the family goals. So what are those things that are important to each of you? What are those wishes, hopes, and dreams? And really taking that kind of supportive approach, being very considerate in the process of how the other person feels, and working hard not to get defensive. I think that's a big thing. People, when they get attached to something or they really want something and they know that this is they're meant for more, then they can get defensive if the other person is scared and isn't immediately where they are. So it's being patient with them and saying, here's where I am. Here's where you are. I understand where you are. It's completely okay and acceptable. Let's try to find a path where the two of us are meeting together and are getting what we both want out of this future that we have together. Do you have anything else you want to say on that? No? What's that?
No, you said it perfectly. It boils down to that, to having that open communication. It's you may find, like you said, you have a stronger bond with your husband because you're in business together, but initially it's almost like you're starting a new relationship, right? Because you're finding things about one another that you had no idea. Can you just stay home and let's just see each other when I'm home for dinner? But in reality, now you're having to work together, collaborate. So it's a whole different world, right? And it's kind of the same thing when, even if they're not going to be involved in the business, they kind of are, because this is not, like Eric said, this is not like going to work and coming home for dinner. This is you running a business, having to see each other more often. So they're going to have a say no matter what, in the decision making and even the day-to-day activities as a business owner.
Right. So the third one is really dialing in to where your wife or husband is at. So Amanda, do you want to talk about how you dial into what's their starting point? Do they have business experience, and just kind of understanding the audience that you're presenting to, just like as if you were at work or at giving a presentation, you always have to know your audience. So can you just talk a little bit about how you dial into where they're at, who they are, and how you can talk to that group? So for instance, like using phrases like, your opinion is important to me. I want you to have a voice. I think we can build something great together. Those kinds of things that help having that conversation going and really being dialed in.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna go back to finding out what's holding them back.
Yeah.
So what's the main concern? And it's gonna be, most of the time, it's when are you bringing money to us? Yeah. That's pretty much the main one. Another one that I hear quite a bit is the flexibility one, where Are you going to be working crazy hours, nights and weekends? And if there are children involved, they would love to have that, more of that. And then, but yeah, those are the most important ones. So once you're able to figure that out and you're having those conversations, you're asking them, look, this is the reason why I want to explore this opportunity. I think that this will solve a lot of problems and a lot of things that we're constantly kind of going through. And it could be maybe they're unhappy with their job and they're working really long hours and they're not able to go on their family vacations and they're not able to be home at nighttime to spend time with the family. So there are lots of challenges that if they were to buy a business, those problems would kind of go away, right? But it's almost like creating a business plan and presenting it to the spouse, right?
And that's number 4, which is the promise of a plan. You have to create a plan. You can't treat this like just a casual conversation about, going on a vacation or something. This is a business. And so your spouse or your circle of influence, they need to feel like you have your idea in order, that you have a plan, you have a structure. You're not being, flippant with where you're taking our family. And so this idea of having a business plan and really putting that together is very important. So Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about having a business plan?
Well, so no matter what business you get into, you ought to have a business plan. You ought to do financial pro forma projections based upon the due diligence that you're doing. But business ownership, all right, you have to ask yourself what your goals are, all right? For me, independent business ownership provides 2 things. It provides financial independence, and it provides self-direction, all right? I am not subject to an employer's whims. I am not subject to ad management unless it's my own, and then it's on me, all right? And so I think that the people who will be most successful in business are the people who want to be self-directed. They want to create their own legacy. I use legacy a lot because that's what I hope that most entrepreneurs are building, all right? And that should be a shared goal with your spouse. The business plan is more technical, of course. This is how we're going to get there. Mm-hmm. But this goal needs to be a shared goal with your spouse. If your spouse says, Social Security checks are okay with me, okay, then perhaps we have a misalignment of goals, all right? The other thing to keep in mind is that we 3 on this webinar have done webinars to show you exactly how to make sure that the business that you're buying, so long as you follow the system, will achieve those goals. It's not I want to achieve that goal, and I hope this is the business to get me there. All right? You got to watch the webinar on due diligence, okay? We mean it, and you should do it because it guarantees you, and Sabrina goes, oh gosh, don't use the word guarantee, but it guarantees you that if you follow the system, you will achieve these goals of independence and self-direction. But remember, let's be practical. Let's always be practical. It is not a light switch. You don't go from day 1, invest, hit the light switch, and on day 2, oh my gosh, this is everything Eric said. I'm self-directed, I'm financially independent. It's tough. Even in a system where if you follow it, you're going to achieve your business plan and your goals, it's still tough. And without something as simple as moral support from those around you, it just makes it that much tougher.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel, all right? And I've used this, and everybody on this webinar says, man, his marriage sounds like it's messed up, right? So
He's married to a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's tons of fun. She's super sweet and sassy and awesome. And beautiful.
I've said to Jill, my spouse, I said, my gosh, sometimes I feel like an old working mule, right? It's like I'm working 10 hours a day and, I feel like it's, the day repeats itself over and over and there are challenges constantly. Of course there are. That's business ownership. That's part of self-direction. But without her moral support, forget the participation in the business, just the moral support, it would make it that much more difficult. And in a startup phase, it will make you even more doubtful of what you're doing. And that's what you don't want.
Right.
You don't want doubt when you are buying your own business. You want to be like Amanda, okay? No doubts, this is going to be successful. But if you got somebody talking in this ear saying, I'm not so sure, that's going to make you doubt yourself. And you don't want that. That's bad for the marriage and it's bad for the business.
Yeah, you definitely need a cheerleader. You need somebody who's on your side. And the easy way to get that is to ask for it and to ask for their support. So say, I need your support. I need to be doing this with you. So if I've strayed and kind of veered away from really doing this together, let me know, because we have to be together in this. We have to achieve this together. And those kinds of acts of conversation, I think they make such a difference in my experience. All right, so Amanda, what do you have to say about getting a business plan, getting ready, getting the proposal? There's clearly, you want to know what you're investing in. So the research process that you have to go through is really important. And then knowing who you are, that's also really important. So what are some of the things that you would say are important for putting together this proposal to your spouse or tribe? Oh, you're on mute.
It boils down to the basics of when you're trying to evaluate a business. So it's answering the 6 questions, right? So
yeah.
How much is it going to cost us? How much money can we make? What are other people saying about it, right? So what's the support of the system like? What are other franchisees saying about that system? Can we see ourselves doing it? So well, not necessarily the spouse, but the husband. So can I see myself doing it? So it's answering all of those questions and just having that in not too formal, because everybody's going to be different. I wouldn't come up and look, every case is different. And this is not even spouses. It could be an investor. It could be somebody working with a business partner. Right now I actually have, I'm working with, it's the brother and then the other 2 brothers. One of them is a franchise lawyer, Eric, and the other one is, he's a business owner, and they want to help their brother. So they're going to be investing in the business, but they don't, right now, they're just kind of waiting to see what options I'm going to bring forward. And then they're going to want to see projections. They're going to want to see all of those things. So it really, my approach is a little bit different, because I want my candidate to be able to have all the data and collect all the data before he actually does a formal presentation on which franchise he thinks will be the best fit for him.
Right.
Not for his brothers, not for the spouse, but for him, because ultimately he's going to be running that business. And that is another misconception. Just because the wife or the husband, they like that business because they think it's flashy, they think it's attractive. But if the person running the business can't do the day-to-day, or they don't see themselves in that business, you're not helping, right? It has to always start with the person running the business, and then the spouse being supportive of their decision.
Mm-hmm. There's, I think, one more way to get the circle of influence or tribe to be supportive, and that's to show what's needed in the business, in that business plan. So what are the skills you need? And then how do you have those skills, or how do you plan to get those skills? So that kind of skills alignment and skills matching is really important, because it builds their own confidence in you and your desire to do this. Like, oh, this does seem like a good fit. And we have a tool, an entrepreneurial profile, which helps you to identify what your skills and talents and competencies are. And then we also use that tool to assess top performers at different franchises. So we can say the top performers at these franchises test the same way that I do. Their results are the same as mine. So it becomes a more powerful conversation that you can have with people, to help them to understand that, wow, this is something that you can do well, and you can become exceptional at. All right, so let's go ahead and do the final poll. So we have a little poll here. If you guys want to go over to the chat box, how does it work, Chelsea? There we go. So if you could just put on the poll anything that you would like to, how you'd like to answer this. If you found the perfect franchise, what would it take for your spouse to buy into it? And then we'll see the poll results in just a minute here. Any final words that either of you would have about this topic of just preparing for those conversations with the spouse? Be brave.
So, Sabrina?
Yeah.
So I don't make this stuff up. Well, during the course of this webinar, all right, the viewers have watched me look down, all right? That's because my spouse is texting me back and forth and putting a contract on an apartment complex as part of our business, all right?
Cool.
Business ownership is one of the most exhilarating things that you can do. It is, you know, Joe Biden got elected, or it looks like he's going to be elected. I didn't particularly care for him being elected, but I'm okay. While some people are freaking out, I'm okay, because I own my own business. And better yet, I own it with my spouse, all right? And I think Sabrina said that, you know, the conversations that they have, that the planning that they have is exhilarating. It's exciting and exhilarating. And it spices up a marriage in a way that most marriages are not spiced up. So I will, again, guys, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Remember, I'm a lawyer and a CPA. But the fact of the matter is that spousal buy-in and spousal participation, be it as small as moral support or as involved in as I'm submitting a contract, what do you think of this? Is fantastic. It's really a lot of fun. And why shouldn't we have fun and make money doing it? So those are really my final thoughts, Sabrina.
All right. So, Amanda, do you have anything really quick you want to say? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. No, I said I think I gave all of my tips, and really again it's getting them to understand the opportunity and communicate, and do it in a way that you're not overwhelming them, and getting everybody on the same page. So
Yep. So the 4 things were: have a family meeting. They are find out what your family goals are, dial into where your spouse or tribe is, and then meet them there, have the conversations there, and then promise a plan. Make sure that you have a strategic direction that you're going to deliver to them so that it's more formal and it feels like you're taking it more seriously than just a casual conversation. That does make a big impact on their willingness to accept that information. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Eric and Amanda for your time and for your insights. It was really helpful. I also want to let everyone know that we do have the Good Franchise Expo coming up on November 18th. It is a free event for anyone looking to purchase a franchise. We have a lot of different cool things going on, raffles, prizes. We've got tours of different types of franchises, like investment-minded franchise owners or home-based franchise owners, etc. So you're not spending a lot of time at the expo just wasting that time. You can actually pick a tour that makes sense for you and what you're trying to achieve in your business. So if you'd like to join that expo, you can go to franchisebce.com. That's B as in boy, E as in expo, and wait, B is in boy, C is in Charlie, and E is in expo.com. And again, thank you so much for your time. We'll go ahead and check out the poll and see what our answers were. And the speed round information is in here as well. And if anyone has any questions, we can open it up for questions at this time as well. All right. So the biggest challenge with the spouse from the poll is that the loss of paycheck would be the biggest concern to overcome. And there are funding options available that and plans that you can put in place that help to overcome that. So if you are looking for more information on that, then please definitely reach out to us and we can help you to prepare for those kinds of conversations and to prepare for that loss of paycheck. There's certain funding options that can pay you a salary from day one so that you don't have a loss of paycheck. Financial security and ramp up time are the other ones as well. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys so much for participating. We really appreciate it. And if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and call it a night. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone, thank you.